Are you hoping for a market crash? Well, let me tell you in this video, I can tell you all about market crashes, especially in real estate. So stick around because I'm getting after it right now. If you're new to our channel, hit the subscribe button, tap the notification because we're keeping it real every week, putting out videos about living in the Portland metro area and all things regarding living and moving to the Portland area. And if you would like to reach out to us, all of our contact information is in the description below. We would be more than happy to hop on a call with you. So many people are waiting for a market crash. Whether you think you see signs in the marketplace indicating that there is an imminent crash going to happen, or maybe you're hoping for one so you can better afford housing. Well, I'd like to talk about a market crash because I've been through the most severe real estate market of the last few decades, and I can tell you it is not something that you want to experience because it will affect everyone if there were to have a market crash. But we can only go back to 2008 through 2012 in the Great Recession to see how that one was set up for absolute and utter failure, and how today's market might be a bit different, and whether there are signs and indicators that show a crash coming, or whether it's just market cycles. So let's get after it. Let me give you a little bit of my background so that you can understand how I went through the Great Recession. I have been in real estate since 2001. I saw the big run up to 2008. And I can tell you it was a disaster waiting to happen. Now, I was fairly new in the real estate industry at the time. I saw and heard things happening that, quite frankly, if I saw them today, I could easily shut them down. But there was, without going into great detail, if you know anything about the last recession we went through, that it was a hot mess. I mean, they were giving out loans to anybody and everybody, and the type of loans that they were giving out were extraordinarily dangerous for anybody to have, and yet the almighty dollar was what people were focused on, just making a buck off people to their unfortunate demise. And what became of that was the Great Recession of 2008 through 2012. I was in real estate during that time, and I can tell you things fell off a cliff. Now let's define a market crash. A market crash usually is an indication of 35% or more loss of value. Let me say that again, 35% or more loss of value. It almost seemed in 2008 through 2011 that home prices were just chronically going down and down and down. But here's the kicker, y'all. If we go through a market crash, usually that means an extraordinary amount of job loss. And that usually means for those of you who are sitting on the fence waiting for a market crash for it to get a whole lot more affordable, unfortunately, you're going to get caught up in it. And in the 2008 market crash, there was nobody who survived that and didn't feel it somewhere. Maybe you felt it in your pocketbook. Maybe you got laid off. Maybe your loan fell into short sale status. Maybe you went into foreclosure. Honestly, we had to do what we had to do. And being a realtor back then, I called myself a social worker because, quite frankly, everybody I talked to about selling their house was either short sale or had not been making payments, and we were talking about foreclosure possibilities. And I'm going to tell you, it was the most darkest time ever. Yeah, looking back on it, I think a lot of people wished they jumped in and bought, right? In the low lows. But for those people who had, for lack of a better word, balls to jump into a market that seemingly was crashing and everybody was worried about losing their job, money, etc., it was tough for buyers to get into that market. If you did have a stable job and a down payment and you qualified, there was a glut of inventory on the market. That's why the prices were so darn low. Almost half of the market at that time, or a good portion of the market, was either a short sale, which was a pre-foreclosure, or a foreclosure. And if that doesn't sound daunting as a home buyer to jump into a marketplace where you're going, God, everybody's underwater. Am I going to buy a house and then 3 or 4 months later I'm going to be underwater? I personally bought a house in 2007, right at the tippy top, and I quickly fell into underwater on my house. Now, luckily, I stayed in that house for a good decade and rode that horse right back up. But the sad part is for many years of living there, I was underwater. Thankfully, I didn't have to sell. But in many cases, people have all kinds of reasons they have to sell. It can be they got a job loss, they're moving across country, whatever the case might be. So you don't want to wish a market crash. Now, maybe you're not wishing for a market crash, but you're worried the market could crash. So what are the indicators that we see right now that could indicate some kind of imminent change in the market? Now, for it to crash, we would have to see quick, fast, severe drops in home prices. But let me give you a little frame of reference of what the market is like today versus what it was like before. Now, we have not set ourselves up the same way as the 2008 crash. That probably won't happen in that way ever again because we have gotten smarter. There was a lot of things that changed in the real estate industry, specifically in lending and finance, that kept us from ever going into that exact state again. We no longer just tell you to fog a mirror and you can qualify for a loan. Ever since the Dodd-Frank showed up, they are now very rigid about who gets loans. And I'm going to tell you, if you've gotten a loan in the last several years, you know how invasive it is. You think, oh, I've got my W-2 and my bank statements. Nope, they want a full, what feels like a colonoscopy. They want all the information about you. And then sometimes they want you to write little letters about why this payment wasn't paid on this date or whatever it is. It's very rigorous to get a loan nowadays, but that's a good thing. As painful as it is as a home buyer to go get a loan, thank God that they're taking the steps to make sure everyone is truly qualified and that the risk is lower than ever. So that's number one, is we're not in that state of mind anymore. But are we in other market climates that could still cause that? Now, if you're watching the news or you're living in the Portland metro area or anywhere in the United States, you're starting to see a lot of layoffs happen, aren't you? Recently, locally here, we had Intel. They announced that they're going to be doing layoffs globally, and locally they're going to be reducing their headcount by 15%. That's significant in a big company. Also, I have a client that works for Wells Fargo here in Portland, and he's moving down to Texas because he was notified that if he doesn't move, he will be laid off by the end of the year because they're closing down some of the areas here in Wells Fargo. Additionally, Nike just went through significant layoffs as of a couple of months ago. So really, we are seeing a lot of companies right size. And then I just read the other day that Dell Computers is laying off 11,000, and Salesforce is starting to look like they might be preparing for layoffs as well, amongst a lot of other companies. So that is definitely an indicator that things aren't all peachy and rosy at the corporate level. So we may see that trend, and that is definitely a trend in the direction to see a recession. If we continue to see a recession happen, you'll see a lot more companies releasing people from employment. Now, we've been waiting for bad employment numbers in the real estate industry. Why? Why would we hope for bad numbers in the real estate industry? Because bad employment numbers reduce interest rates. That's right. Bad employment numbers reduced interest rates. And what have we been facing for the last 18 months? Super high, crazy interest rates. And sometimes the market, when it was hitting in that high sevens, close to 8%, the market is at a dead stop. So on some level, we have to have a pressure relief valve, if you will, in the markets in order to see the market move forward. So currently, we're starting to see the employment numbers not be so peachy. We're also starting to see the inflation numbers get under control. Or are we? So that is the other question we're also facing is currently, as interest rates have been nosediving, which is great for the housing market because it incentivizes people to buy. But on the flip side, we're seeing people lose their jobs or layoffs coming or uncertainty happen. And then as well as inflation being almost to where the goal is at 2%. But wait a minute, if we lower interest rates, wouldn't that shoot up the market and cause inflation to happen? Possibly. And that's the next thing we're looking for in the marketplace is with reducing in interest rates as we're approaching an election year, will those interest rates go down enough to cause the market to get quick in real estate? Meaning we are fully controlled in real estate by interest rates. So when interest rates were almost at 8% earlier this year and late last year, the market was dead. Showings were down, offers were down, sales were way, way down. But obviously, as interest rates go down, those motivational, interest rates tend to get buyers jumping into the marketplace. But Currently, we haven't seen that just yet. It's only been a couple of weeks of lower interest rates. They've been extremely low for what we've faced this entire year. But in talking to my colleagues and also looking at the market, it hasn't quite done it yet. We're not seeing the fever pitch that we're typically used to when interest rates go down. So in the coming weeks, as we face the elections, it's really typical during an election cycle. The run up right before it is for them to really reduce interest rates because, of course, whoever makes office gets to take credit for the market just magically started to happen again. And this will probably be an interesting case because nothing is what it seems this year. The best word we can describe for 2024 is weird. Nothing's playing by the rules. Everything's weird. They started the year off telling us interest rates were going to go down and they only went up. And then, of course, now we're facing the end of the year, the fall coming up, and then the winter. And with that comes this big unknown, this big uncertainty. And buyers don't like uncertainty. Not even sellers like uncertainty. There are some sellers who are going to sit on the fence and wait it out until they know what and who gets elected. So stay tuned on that. I will do another market update for you guys as we face the next 60 to 90 days of market cycles because things are going to get really interesting soon. We've also seen a lot of change in the real estate industry, as I've done another video on the changes with way that agents are getting compensated and how we're doing our business. That is another uncertain item that has been placed into effect this month of August 2024. So if you're watching the real estate industry, that could also cause another trip up, in my opinion. A lot of my colleagues and I talk about this because we're going through a huge paradigm shift in the real estate industry on how we're doing business. Now, it doesn't mean we can't sell, and it doesn't mean agents are going away in regards to how we've been doing things, but the way we've been doing business is very different, and it's hard to get an industry of over 1.5 million realtors nationwide who've been doing business the same way for the better part of 40 plus years to do it completely different in a very short amount of time. And I can tell you there's a lot of confusion in the real estate industry right now. There's new forms, new ways we have to practice. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Clients are coming at us wanting to know, what does this mean for me? How are we going to do business differently? And so if you put that in the mix, I think it's going to cause a little bit of a hesitation in the market. I actually can kind of see it as we speak over the last few weeks, as we've had to prepare the entire industry and, of course, preparing our clients for those discussions. It's been confusing for everybody. And I think when you have confusion and then all the other things going on in the marketplace, it's one other element that's causing the market to be the way it is. Does that mean it's going to turn into a market crash? No. But what we could see is enough elements in the market to sort of slow it down or make it so that it's a little more buyer friendly. And to be honest with you, this year, we've turned into a bit more of a friendly buyer's market here in the Portland area. There's a lot more negotiating happening between buyers and sellers than ever before, at least probably in the last 5 or 8 years. We're not seeing that fever pitch of offers on every single house. Doesn't mean that every single house is doing that. There are some areas of town where the inventory is still very, very low and in high demand, where we are still seeing a multiple offer situation or houses going very, very quickly. But in a lot of areas, you guys, there is a ton of room for movement as a buyer to jump in and negotiate like you haven't been able to negotiate for a very long time. So maybe you see houses sitting on the market longer, maybe you see lots of price reductions. That's usually an indicator that in those particular areas, prices are softening. I've talked about this in another video. We're seeing a lot of softening. It's not crashing. Just because prices come down does not mean a crash. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, in order to see a crash, we'd have to see at least 35% in reductions very quickly. And it would be a domino effect in the marketplace. Trust me, you will know when a market has crashed. It's no secret when it crashes. But are we leading up to one? I don't see it happening yet. The other thing that you should be aware of is that the mortgages in the country are at an all-time low, meaning we have a huge group of owners who have really low interest rates, sub 5% interest rates, and they're not moving. Some of them have decided to compromise on the house and not move up or move down and just hold on to the house. And that's keeping inventory low. Also, we have a ton of homeowners who own their homes outright. I've seen a statistic that says 40% of all homes in America are owned outright. That means they don't have any debt on that house. And that usually means they're not going anywhere. So when you have a portion of the population that owns their home outright, a portion of their home owners that have extraordinarily low interest rates that we will probably never see again for the foreseeable future, that means that we're not really set up for a market crash. And now, is there a population of homeowners out there who maybe bought in the last, say, 3.5 years as interest rates went up? Maybe they banked on being able to refinance their loans and getting out from underneath a 7.5% interest rate. And yes, there are some indicators out there that show people who bought in those super high interest rates, hoping that they'd be able to refinance to a lower rate, are starting to see signs of maybe struggle. Is it large enough to be concerned yet for a market crash in that category? I personally don't see that, but stay tuned because we don't know how the numbers are all going to roll out if we do in fact hit a recession where people start to lose their jobs and realize that things are tightening. I would say if there's any kind of market correction happening, it would be for the people who bought in the last 3.5 years, had great jobs, but also had high inflation hit them in the typical things that you buy, as well as a high mortgage payment. And then if the prices soften a little bit, they lose enough equity that all of a sudden they could be seeing themselves getting into trouble. Or if they got a variable mortgage rate on their property and that rate went up as they thought it would be lower interest rates by now and they would be able to refinance. So yes, I could see a situation where a chunk of homeowners who unfortunately hit the high interest rates, the high inflation, and life just got way too expensive to be able to afford what they have anymore. Not to mention, we're seeing the trend of high insurance happening in the country and high property taxes. So that's a scenario where I could say, yeah, that population of people could be in more trouble if something changed in their financial picture. But is it going to cause a market crash? Yet to be seen. I don't think so from my personal perspective. When I look back at 2008 through 2012, I saw the entire marketplace buying with loans, many people qualifying for loans that should have never gotten those loans, getting themselves into trouble. The market was saturated with bad debt. People were even taking out more debt on their debt. They were getting, mailings in the mail saying, hey, take out an equity line of credit on that extra $100,000 of equity you have. People would do it, and then next thing you know, they were in trouble. So I do not think, in my professional opinion, that we are set up at this time for a market crash. I do think we're being set up currently for a recession of some kind. We've kind of played with this idea of recession for a few years, but I think we have some indicators that could definitely see that happening. But it's all yet to be seen, and I think if anything, it could also be a soft recession. So stay tuned. I'll keep you guys posted as I continue to monitor and watch what's happening out here. I will always keep it real with you. If I see anything that is of great concern, you'll always hear it from me because I don't believe in sugarcoating anything. And I think it's important to be straight with people so they can make appropriate decisions on their home buying and home selling journeys. And I hope this was helpful. If you guys want to drop a comment below, I know you guys are all really good at comments and putting your 2 cents in. I would love to hear from you, good, bad, ugly. If you thought I nailed it, if you thought I was wrong, if you see some other indicator out there that I did not cover that would maybe shine some light on which direction we are heading. And we'll all play Rub the Genie Bottle and see what happens in the coming year. But drop your comments below. And of course, reach out if you have any questions about the real estate market or want to get in touch with us about making a move in and around the Portland metro area. All right, see you guys on the next video.